Hey, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, here with another Kickstarter review. Today I'm looking at Townsfolk Tussle. And as always, I receive no compensation for my Kickstarter coverage. I just want to help you make an informed decision. We've had some great boss battling games on the channel in the past year, but all of them have campaigns attached. Kingdom Death, Oathsworn, Aeon Trespass. So the idea of a one-off condensed experience really appealed to me, but does it deliver on that promise? Let's find out. So first, to go over some positives, and there are a bunch of them, I really enjoy the core combat system here, especially the way you can build combos with your character powers and your gear powers. You can taunt enemies away from weak players, you can boost each other's attacks, you can set up little attack combos. It's a pretty simple system, incredibly quick to teach, but it works really well and gives you a nice feel of tactical cleverness, at least most of the time. Another really big positive for the game is the variety in the bosses called Ruffians. There are, I think, 10 of them, plus maybe 2 more depending on unlocks during the campaign. And they each have a pretty big and fully unique AI deck. I don't think I've seen all the cards for a single one of these guys because they shuffle and you'll kind of see different ones each time you fight them. But they each have their own consistent theme and quirk, their own kind of fun thing they do that's different than all the rest. And on top of that, depending on when you fight them, they have little power-ups and special abilities. And if they're the last person you fight out of 4 bosses, they have a fully unique scenario. And they also each give you different items when you defeat them, so tons of variety in who you face and when, and just overall with the bosses. Another thing I think the game does really well, better than Kingdom Death, better than Aeon Trespass, maybe better than Oathsworn, is that they have a lot of really diverse terrain in each of the battles. Like you can go to a farmhouse and try to get the farmer to give you some food, or shoot the ruffian for you. You can drive a car over them, you can have a lake you're being pulled towards, you can dig in a vegetable patch, get lost in a cornfield. And not only do these add to the tactical puzzle I already talked about and give you a reason to move around and do different things, but they also add to the villain variety I already talked about, because since the terrain is keyed to the villain in a lot of cases, they'll have cards that specifically interact with it, which is something I don't think I've seen in any of these types of games before. So they'll run towards certain types of terrain and get bonuses if they reach it. Just really cool stuff. Another thing I really enjoy is the overall theme here. This mix of sort of whimsy and violence and battle, and it lends itself to a lot of goofy emergent narrative. Like you draw these town event cards, 1 per player, before fighting each of the bosses, and they can have these crazy effects, and they're often hilarious. Like you can have a drinking contest, one of you can fall asleep before the fight. And these decks of cards are just so huge, building the game's variety. You have so many events, so many feats, so many gear cards. Your character's build can be totally different game to game. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, I just really like that this game exists. I love this idea of battling bosses. I like that there are more and more of these games coming out, but this really condensed experience where you can play a whole solo game in maybe an hour and a half, or a full 4 or 5 player game in 2 to 3 hours. I've run several of those, is great. And I think it plays really well co-op. I think it plays well solo, especially if you can control 3 characters, because 2 has a little bit less of the tactical depth. But it's just a really cool and fairly unique design overall. Now that being said, there are some things about Townsfolk Tussle that might want to steer you away from backing potentially. The first potential concern, which I already discussed a bit, is the theme and artwork. I love it, but it's got this weird mix of cartoonishness and violence, like cartoon characters being cut in half, so it's not going to appeal to some people, those who are squeamish. You probably don't want to play this with like your 6-year-old. Secondly, if you don't like randomness and dice rolling and card draws, this one might not be for you, because the AI card that's drawn can drastically change how much damage they do to you, or if they gang up on one person. The gear you get can make you very powerful or not as much. All of your attack rolls require a die roll. Whether or not you can drive a car into the ruffian for massive damage needs a die roll. So if you hate randomness, you might want to run away from this one. Another thing that some players might not enjoy, especially at high player counts, is the fact that sometimes you can lose actions or be knocked out of a fight early, and thus have some player downtime. Now, I do want to note that I've talked to the designers quite a bit about this, and they've done a lot of work to get rid of effects that can consistently cause you to miss actions or miss more than one in a row, and they're also working to make it less likely that the ruffian will destroy one player all at once, so you're probably not going to die until near the end of the fight, and turns are so quick at that point you won't be waiting long. But there's still the potential there, especially if you make a huge blunder of a move and just charge in all by yourself when you're hurt, so be aware that it's a possibility. Finally, my potentially biggest biggest concern, and you can watch my playthrough to see this kind of in action, is that with all the cool combos and tons of different gear and tons of powers, you're sometimes going to get a combination that can feel kind of broken and make the ruffian fall too quickly. And a lot of the coolest mechanics for the ruffians and feeling their different AI systems relies on them lasting for a while. The terrain and making that a useful element in the fight relies on the fight going for a certain amount of time. So if you get a broken combo, especially at a low player count game, it can make the fights a little bit too trivial. Again, watch my video and you'll see that in action. Now, once again, I talked to the designers about this, and they're fully aware of the situation, and they're trying to rebalance some of the things, like some of the items I had in my play that were too consistent in dealing damage. So I think there's a very good chance that this problem will go away, and it's pretty much gone anyway in 3 to 5 character games. It's really mostly a concern at 2 player counts, so just keep that in mind. But overall, I kind of hate to say this, but this is another one that I think I'm going all in for. My bank account weeps because there have been a lot of great Kickstarters lately. But the quick gameplay, how simple it is to teach, how great co-op is, how varied the bosses are, and your builds, and the items, the fun theme, basically everything in this game is working for me, except some of those balance issues, but I'm pretty confident they're going to get those under control, so yeah, I'm in. If you'd like to see the game in action, including some of those issues I mentioned, click the link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.